I want to begin by being honest about my own title, because 10 days inside China destroyed everything is a dramatic phrase, and drama is exactly the register I try to avoid. So, let me say immediately what it does and does not mean. It does not mean I had some kind of breakdown, and it does not mean that China is about to take over the world, and it does not mean that I came back believing some triumphant narrative I had rejected before. What it means is something more precise and I think more genuinely interesting, and it is this. I carried, for years, a particular mental model of where economic power sits in the world and where it is heading, a comfortable and largely unexamined model, and 10 days of direct observation destroyed that model completely, and I have not been able to rebuild it. That is what was destroyed. Not my composure and not my judgment, but a framework, a way of seeing that I had held so long and so comfortably that I did not experience it as a model at all, but simply as the way things were. And the strangest and most important part of the whole experience, the part I keep returning to, is captured in a phrase that has stayed with me since I came back, which is that I can't unsee it. Whatever else happened in those 10 days, the thing that happened most consequentially is that I saw something I cannot now unsee. And the irreversibility of that seeing is the thing I actually want to talk about, because I think it matters far more than any specific observation about any specific country. Let me be careful, as always, about the two extremes, because this is a subject where people reach immediately for one of them and both are wrong. The first extreme is the conversion narrative, the story in which the skeptic goes and sees and comes back a true believer in the opposite of what he thought before. And this is not my story, because swapping one comfortable narrative for its mirror image is not seeing clearly. It is merely relocating your blindness. And the second extreme is the comfortable dismissal, the insistence that, of course, nothing really changed, that direct experience is overrated, that a trip is just a trip, and the ambient understanding one had before was perfectly adequate. This is also wrong, and it is the more common error among sophisticated people, and it is precisely the error that protects the comfortable model from the destruction that direct experience threatens. The truth is neither conversion nor dismissal. The truth is that direct observation can destroy a model, that the destruction is irreversible, that you cannot unsee what you have genuinely seen, and that this irreversibility is both the great value and the great danger of going to look at things directly, and it is worth understanding carefully. So let me start with what it actually means for a model to be destroyed, because it is different from what most people mean when they talk about changing their mind. And the difference is the whole point. There is a distinction between changing an opinion and destroying a model, and it is a distinction of kind, not of degree. An opinion is a conclusion you reach within a framework. It is cheap to change, and changing it is reversible, because the framework that generated it remains intact and could generate the old opinion, again, if the inputs shifted. But a model is the framework itself, the underlying structure through which you interpret everything, the thing that generates the opinions rather than being one of them. And when direct evidence destroys a model, something happens that is not reversible, because you can no longer rebuild the old framework for the simple reason that you have now seen the evidence the old framework could not accommodate, the evidence that destroyed it, and that evidence does not go away. The old model was comfortable precisely because it did not have to account for what you have now seen. And once you have seen it, the old model is no longer available to you, because a model that cannot account for the reality in front of you is not a model you can inhabit anymore. This is what I mean by I can't unsee it. Perception at this level is one way. Once you have genuinely seen the thing that a comfortable model denied, the comfortable model is gone and you cannot return to it because you cannot make yourself not have seen. Now let me describe what specifically got destroyed, because it will be concrete and it will make the abstraction clear. My model, the comfortable one I carried for years, had certain things sized wrong. It had the scale of what is being built in China sized too small. It had the seriousness of the effort sized too low. It had the pace of development sized too slow. And it had the time horizon on which decisions are being made sized too short. because I was unconsciously projecting onto China the short horizons of the political and economic culture I come from. And here is the crucial thing about what direct observation did. It did not simply adjust these numbers, nudging my estimates up a bit while leaving the framework intact. If it had merely adjusted the numbers, the change would have been reversible, an opinion revised within a model. What it did instead was destroy the frame that had been generating the wrong numbers in the first place. Standing inside the infrastructure, moving through it at speed, seeing the density of the manufacturing ecosystems, feeling the seriousness of the ambition in the physical environment, I did not think my estimate was 10% too low. I thought the entire framework I was using to generate estimates was wrong, was operating on assumptions that the reality in front of me contradicted. And once that happened, the framework did not survive. And I have not been able to reassemble it because I have seen what it could not account for. The principles that determine how to hold a model of the world at all, how to think about where genuine value and genuine capability are accumulating without being trapped by a comfortable framework that the reality contradicts, are worth studying deliberately and as a connected whole, and there is a body of work that lays them out carefully called the Naval Codex. It is not a set of predictions, and it is not a travelogue. It is a systematic account of the underlying principles that determine who sees clearly enough to preserve and build genuine wealth through the transitions that comfortable models tend to deny. If you want to engage with those principles directly, it is linked in the description, and there is a code on the screen you can scan to reach it. And engaging with the principles directly is what matters, because the principles are the thing that lets you update your model when the evidence demands it, rather than defending a comfortable framework against the reality it cannot accommodate. I want to think about why direct experience destroys models when information alone does not, because this is genuinely important and it is the reason the whole trip mattered. Here is the thing that is almost embarrassing to admit. I had read all of it. Every observation I made in those 10 days, I could have found and largely had found in publicly available information before I went. The scale, the manufacturing depth, the infrastructure, the energy investment, the technological development, all of it was documented, all of it was available, none of it was secret. So why did reading it for years leave my comfortable model intact, while 10 days of seeing it destroyed that model completely? And the answer, once you see it, explains a great deal about why people fail to update their views on almost everything. The answer is that information filtered through an intact model gets absorbed by the model. The framework you already hold does not passively receive new information. It actively processes it, fits it into the existing structure, explains it away, discounts what does not fit, emphasizes what does. When I read about the scale of Chinese infrastructure, my comfortable model absorbed the information and neutralized it, filing it under categories that preserve the framework. This is probably overstated. This is propaganda. This is impressive but fragile. This does not really change the fundamental picture. The model defended itself against the information, as models do, and remained intact. But direct experience bypasses the model's defenses. The visceral, sensory, undeniable reality of being physically present, of moving through the thing at speed, of standing inside the scale, is evidence of a kind the model cannot process and neutralize in the same way, because it is not a claim to be evaluated and discounted. It is an experience that simply is, that presses on your perception directly, that does not pass through the interpretive machinery in the way that a written claim does. And that is why it can destroy the frame that reading could not touch. This is the genuine and specific value of going and seeing things directly, rather than filtering all experience through the ambient narratives that surround every significant subject, and it is not a vague or romantic value. It is a precise one. Reading confirms your model, because your model processes the reading. Seeing can destroy your model, because the direct experience bypasses the processing. And this is why the people who genuinely update their view of the world are so often the ones who went and looked, not because they read more or thought harder, but because they exposed themselves to the one kind of evidence a comfortable model cannot absorb and neutralize, the evidence of direct experience. And here is where the destruction of the model revealed something I had never been able to see, something that had nothing to do with China at all and everything to do with me. And it is the thing that made the trip a matter of self-knowledge and not merely observation. Once the comfortable model of the world's economic order was destroyed, once I could no longer inhabit the framework in which a single system sat permanently at the fixed center, I could suddenly see something the old model had rendered completely invisible, which was my own total concentration in that single system. My entire financial life, my assets, my sense of what was safe, all of it denominated in and dependent on one monetary and institutional arrangement, a concentration so complete that the old model had made it impossible to perceive, because the old model treated that system as the fixed reference point against which everything else was measured, and you cannot see the risk in a reference point, because it is the thing you measure other things against rather than a thing you measure. The destruction of the model did not just change my view of China. It made visible a concentration risk in my own position that the comfortable framework had concealed, and once I had seen it, I could not unsee that either. The way capital actually moves when the assumption of a single permanent economic center begins to dissolve, where it flows and why, and what happens to those concentrated in one system versus those who diversified out of the unexamined concentration, is worth understanding in its specific mechanics rather than in vague outline. And there is a framework that traces exactly this, called the Dragon Pivot. Despite the name, it is not really about any single country. It is about how the shifts in the economic and monetary order unfold across history, what they do to concentrated positions, and how those who saw the shift early diversified before it mattered. You can reach it through the code shown on the screen or through the link in the description for anyone who wants the fuller picture. And the fuller picture matters here precisely because the deepest risk is so often the concentration you cannot see, the one hidden by the very model through which you see everything else. This brings me to what you actually do once the model is destroyed and the concentration is visible, because seeing clearly is only valuable if it changes how you position yourself. And here, the crucial distinction is between owning genuine productive capability and owning mere financial claims on a particular system. What I could not unsee once the model was gone was that genuine productive capability, real manufacturing, real energy, real technological depth is accumulating in the world, and that its accumulation is not confined to any single place, and that the durable thing to own is productive capability itself, wherever it is, rather than paper claims tied to the continued dominance of one arrangement. This is not, and I want to be clear, a conclusion that you should therefore buy assets in one particular country, which would be to rebuild a comfortable model pointed in a new direction. It is a deeper and more portable point that durable value lives in genuine productive capability and that the resilient position owns such capability rather than depending entirely on the continuation of a single system. The work of distinguishing genuine productive capability from mere financial engineering and of building a position grounded in things that produce real value rather than in claims that depend on one arrangement persisting is worth doing systematically, and there is a framework devoted precisely to that called the Sovereign Vault. It is concerned with building durable, generationally significant wealth grounded in real productive assets and real institutional protection rather than in the financial claims that look sound only so long as a single comfortable arrangement holds. It is linked below, and the code on the screen will take you straight to it for anyone who wants to go deeper on the question of what to actually own once the comfortable model has been destroyed and you can see the concentration it was hiding. And that is the practical heart of it, because seeing clearly means little if you remain out of the habits the old model built, concentrated in exactly the position the clear sight would counsel against. I want to add the dimension that made the productive picture most vivid and most impossible to unsee, which is the convergence I observed of manufacturing and energy and artificial intelligence operating together at scale. Because it was not any one of these that destroyed the model. It was the combination, the sight of a manufacturing ecosystem of extraordinary depth being fused with serious artificial intelligence development and powered by enormous investment in cheap and abundant energy, each element amplifying the others, the manufacturing generating the data and the scale, the artificial intelligence accelerating the manufacturing, the cheap energy lowering the cost of both the manufacturing and the computation. My comfortable model had these as separate things, sized separately and each discounted separately. And what I saw was them operating together as a single compounding system. And a compounding system of that kind is precisely the sort of thing a static model cannot represent, because the model sees the parts and misses the multiplication. And once you have seen the multiplication operating in front of you, you cannot go back to seeing only the parts. Now I want to turn to the deepest thing, the thing I most want to say, because it is the insight that the whole experience finally delivered. And it is not about China and not even about economics. It is about why most people never let this happen to them, why they never let a comfortable model be destroyed, and it is genuinely uncomfortable to look at directly. Here is the insight. The reluctance to look at something directly is very often a reluctance to be changed irreversibly. Some part of the mind understands without articulating it that seeing clearly is one way, that you cannot unsee what you have genuinely seen, and that comfortable blindness is therefore a kind of asset, a possession worth protecting, because once it is lost, it cannot be recovered. And so people avoid the direct experience that would destroy the comfortable model, not out of laziness and not out of stupidity, but out of an intuition that the comfortable model is worth preserving and that seeing clearly would cost them the comfort permanently. They prefer the ambient narrative that confirms the comfortable model, because the ambient narrative can be absorbed and neutralized while leaving the comfort intact. And they avoid the direct experience precisely because they sense correctly that it might destroy the comfort in a way that could not be undone. Comfortable blindness, in other words, is very often chosen, not merely suffered, protected by a quiet and half-conscious refusal to look at the thing that would end it, because the person senses that looking is irreversible and that they would rather keep the comfort than gain the sight. And this is the thing that connects the whole reflection, because it explains why so few people update their model of the world even when the evidence is available, and it explains why direct experience is so much more powerful than reading, and it explains why the comfortable consensus about almost everything persists so long against the accumulating evidence that contradicts it. People do not fail to see because the evidence is unavailable. They fail to see because seeing is irreversible and comfortable blindness is worth protecting, and so they arrange half-consciously not to be exposed to the kind of direct evidence that would destroy the comfortable model, and they succeed in this arrangement, and they preserve the comfort, and they remain blind, until the reality, the comfortable model denied, finally becomes so undeniable that even the ambient narrative cannot neutralize it, at which point they see it all at once, too late to have positioned themselves in advance. I want to be very clear about what I am not saying, because the misreadings are dangerous. I can't unsee it is not a statement of despair, and it is not a burden I am mourning, and it is not a conversion to some narrative of Chinese supremacy and Western doom. This is important because the whole point would be undone if it were merely pessimism or the mirror image narrative. The destruction of a comfortable model is not a loss to be mourned, even though it feels like one. It is a gift, even when it is uncomfortable. Because a model that generates a false picture of the world is not a comfort, it is a liability. And losing a liability, however disorienting, is an improvement. And this is not about China being good and the West being finished, a binary I reject entirely, because the West, and America in particular, has genuine and durable strengths that are real and that I do not dismiss: the deepest capital markets in the world, an extraordinary innovation ecosystem, a genuine position at the frontier of the most important technology of the age. The point is not that one place is rising and another falling in some simple story. The point is about the irreversibility of clear sight, about the destruction of a comfortable model that was generating a false picture, and about what that clear sight demands of you once you have it and can no longer pretend you do not. So I want to end, as I always do, not with an exhortation, but with an invitation to see clearly, because this is, in the end, one of the oldest pieces of wisdom there is. Direct observation is more reliable than ambient narrative. The map is not the territory, and the truth, once genuinely seen, cannot be unseen, which is exactly why it is worth seeking and exactly why so many people avoid it. This is not new. What was new for me was the force with which 10 days of direct experience destroyed a model I had not even known I was protecting. And the humility of realizing that I had been protecting it, that some part of me had arranged for years to absorb the information without confronting the experience, precisely because absorbing information leaves the comfortable model intact while confronting experience destroys it. I can't unsee it. And here's the final thing, the thing that turns the whole experience from a loss into what it actually was. I can't unsee it, and I no longer want to, because the thing I can't unsee is simply the world as it actually is. And once you have glimpsed the world as it actually is, the comfortable model that concealed it is revealed as what it always was, not a comfort, but a blindness. And the destruction of a blindness is not a tragedy. The value of it, invisible for a long time, the way these things always are, through the stretch in which the clear sight only makes you an unfashionable dissenter from the comfortable consensus, reveals itself the way clear sight always reveals itself, which is slowly in the quiet repositioning that a truer model makes possible. And then suddenly, at the moment the reality, the comfortable model denied, becomes undeniable to everyone, and the people who let their comfortable model be destroyed while there was still time, who looked directly and could not unsee it and acted on what they saw, are found to have been all along simply the ones who were willing to lose the comfort in exchange for the truth.